Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and yesterday was the Art Joy of Sharing live stream show, and I did a project on that show, and this is the speed up version of that. So this is a combination of the Pick a Stick challenge from Art Joy of Sharing as well as the prompt from hashtag AJOS Abstract August, which is Spiral. I combined the two challenges into one, which I plan to do with some of the other challenges over at Art Joy of Sharing Art Community this month, because there's a prompt every day for Abstract August. So I want to make something abstracted each day. But we also have the other challenges that we always have every month, like the mood board and the pick a stick challenge and all those. So that's what I'm doing today. The first prompt for the pick a stick challenge this month is scrap. And so that led me to think about making my art journal page, which is going to be a mixed media art journal page today, using collage. And I pretty much always come to that, right? Because I love collage and I love all the painty papers and scraps that I have around my studio, and I like to glue paper to things, and so of course that's where I go, and that's what I love. So this is a 10 by 10 piece of watercolor paper that is in one of my journals that's unfinished. And this month I've been trying to finish up all the extra pages in any of the journals I have so that I can call them done. So this one is a square journal that I made myself. And like I said, it's 140-pound watercolor paper. And the journal is stuck together using key rings, that, you know, the little snap key rings. So I took the page out and I went ahead and put some scraps there all across it, and then I set it aside to dry. I did use matte gel medium to put all those papers on, and I used a scraper to smooth everything out. So I just wanted to get a little bit dry while I address some of the other prompts from this challenge. I'm going to use all 10. The colors this month are terracotta and purple. So I pulled out some other scraps and bits and bobs from my piles of painty papers to mess around with that are in those color families. And at the beginning you saw me get out my color wheel and show how terracotta and purple are close together. They're not next to each other, but they're close together on the wheel. And then the opposite from them are blue-green. And so I decided to make my background with the blue-green, well, mainly because one of the wild card prompts is fish, and I like to make colorful fish. So that's the reason that I picked that color. So then the next prompt was Vaseline, and you can do some fun resist techniques with Vaseline. I didn't have any Vaseline, but I had some of this stuff called Aquaphor, which looked like Vaseline. However, it is more water soluble than Vaseline because it's not a petroleum product, but it does seem that same consistency, kind of oily. So I use that through a stencil with the stencil brush, just pouncing up and down with the stencil brush through the stencil. And then I used some spray. It was Tattered Angels brand matte spray, and sprayed over it, and then took off the excess. And then I sealed that with some matte medium because I'm going to use it as part of my collage later. And I wanted it to be able to stick down. Those, you know, it could resist glue. If it resists paint, it could resist glue, right? The next prompt was twist, and I remembered this thing I used to do way back when I used to stamp, where I'd make marks by twisting the stamp. So I tried some of that with this stamp set that's got spirals and stars in it. I can't keep up with the video. It's going too fast. And I just used different inks to twist on the paper. The one that worked the best was the pigment ink, which is, of course, kind of a slimy ink. Also, I discovered that you do need to have straight edged, so I used the star, and that worked a lot better for that twisting technique. When I was twisting the spiral, it's a circle, so it was just going around in a circle, and it wasn't really having much effect. The next prompt was smudge, and I'm trying all different types of products I have here on my desk with a little pouncing sponge and my fingers and all different things to make different marks with smudging. Sometimes it's fun to just get out scraps and put other paints on them and try to smudge them with your fingers, with sponges, with water. I used all different kinds of products there. Acrylic liners from Snillier and some Posca pen and a Stabilo All pencil and the Stabilo Woodies. I could have went on, but I was trying to make patterned papers in which I could use, painty patterny paper, interesting paper to use in the collage. The next prompt was trace. And so this is actually palette paper, that kind of slippery paper. And I was using different types of products and tracing and drawing and doodling on this using the shapes that are left over from when I was using it as a palette. It's fun to do that. Don't throw away your underpapers and your palette papers because you can use them again in collage. They often have a lot of fun color and pattern on them, even though they seem like a throwaway. Another thing I did was trace a stencil because that's a fun thing to do sometimes. It's another way to use a stencil is to trace around and make interesting shapes with it. So I used the liner again. I used a white Posca pen, a black Posca pen, a Stabilo pencil, and that was trace. So now I have all these different papers to use for collage on my page. So I brought my page back. There was a few areas where I wanted to just kind of fill in with some paint, so I'm just doing that with finger painting to make my background. And then I decided I needed some squiggly lines to make the idea of plants that live in the water, like seaweed or those type of plants that just kind of wave in the water. So the next prompt happened to be cut, which was perfect because I'm cutting these little strips of different painty papers. And I decided to use the purple because the colors are purple and terracotta this month. So different colors of purple, lavender, violet, dioxazine purple, which is a real dark purple, and just cutting with my scissors. So then there are 2 wild cards. In the Pick a Stick Challenge, you use the first 6 prompts in order. If you don't like one of the prompts, you can throw a wild card in instead. But I just decided to use them all. Because I liked them all, there wasn't anything that I was, stuck on or I thought was objectionable. So the wild cards are fish and mosaic. And the way that you can tell if something is a mosaic is because it has grout lines, right? It's got lines in between each little piece, usually of tile or ceramic or glass or something. So I had this big plan, which kind of worked, but not as good as it would have. I had drawn myself a fish on some deli paper that I planned to use for my pattern to make my mosaic. And I wanted the grout lines to show, so I took the outside of that pattern, I cut the fish out, and then I used that as a stencil to put some white gesso on the page so that the white gesso would show through the pieces and would make it look like a mosaic. So that's what I was doing there with that white gesso and that. The thing wouldn't, I needed to tape it down or something, and I'm was live, and it's just you just don't have a lot of time to think about things really well when you're doing it live. You just do it. So now I'm taking all those little papers that I made, and this is the one with the smudged circles on it, and I'm cutting them out using my fish that I drew. I'm cutting the pieces apart and using it as a pattern to make different pieces for my mosaic fish. So I have this one, which is trace. I'm just using sections of the paper, cutting out the pattern. Oftentimes I will use deli paper in a little bit different way, and you've seen me do it where I've put different torn papers onto the deli paper and then cut them out into shapes when I do torn paper paintings, which I haven't done that in a while. I used to be obsessed with that. I used to do it constantly. And lately I haven't been doing it as much. You know, you go through phases of things that you find interesting when you are an artist. You just kind of cycle through different things, and I haven't been doing much paper painting recently. So I'm just using the different pieces, and I want to leave a space in between. So as I'm cutting the pieces, I'm also trying to cut them down a little bit. And in the case of this one, I didn't do it quite right, so I used a X-Acto knife to cut and make sure that there was a space in between so that it does look like a mosaic. I need to leave that white line in between each piece. Also, some of the pieces I'm putting over the top of others, and they don't have white lines because I don't feel like cutting apart the other piece. It's just a lot easier to put one over the top of the other. So I'm just going to use my white Posca pen, which is an acrylic paint pen, to go around those to make the mosaic lines. So that will be easier. That piece of paper isn't one that I made any marks on, but it's still interesting because it's a gel print with some stencils or something on it. So, and there's the one that I traced the stencil with the little shapes. So you can see I've used all these different pieces that I did with all the different prompts in my mosaic fish. There was a little spot down there that I needed to fill in, so I'm just trying to cut a little triangle to fill in there because for when I did the sponging with the gesso, I got a little bit out of control. Sometimes that happens. So, and I'm just putting this last stripe on. I've got his eyeball on there, and this is the last one, the last little stripe. And I think he looks pretty cute. He's done in the right colors, purples and terracotta with a little bit of yellow thrown in. And then, of course, I still need to make some more spirals. I did use the spiral stamp to do the twisting, but that doesn't really show up, and that abstract prompt was spiral. So I have this homemade stamp, which sometimes you get this packing material that's kind of like a dense foam sheet, and I had cut that up and cut it into a spiral shape by just cutting around and turning around and cutting around and around on the other way. And I glued it to another little styrofoam plate, made stamps out of it that are spiral shapes. I did it for another project, which you haven't seen yet, but that really filled in to make like some coral or something around, and I used pigment ink for that because it's opaque. And then I also used the smaller swirl stamp from that same stamp set from Stampin' Up! That's discontinued ages ago, and made kind of like some bubbles in the water with that other spiral stamp and some archival ink. So now I'm just cleaning up the fish. I'm making some shadows around the outside edge with a Posca pen and blending that with a water brush. And then in places where I need to, I'm adding a little bit of white Posca pen to fix areas where there needs to be the grout lines around the outside, which what would be grout lines if there was actual grout on here. But you know what I mean. It's to make it look like a mosaic fish. So I hope you're enjoying this. It's fun to combine a couple different challenges. I'll be doing the mood board sometime later in the month combined with the abstract prompt for that day. You can do whatever you want. You can mix everything up. You can use one prompt, 10 prompts. You can use, we just have these things in Art Joy Sharing Art Community to inspire you to do art, and that's the only reason. There's no rules. So also remember to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment or question below. You can subscribe, you can turn on your notification bells, you can share this on Pinterest or Facebook. All those things help my channel, and I'm always very appreciative when you do them to help my channel grow. So that's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.